Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
PD Beats here from Popternative, speaking to actor and photographer Oliver Blank. Welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Petey. I appreciate it. I'm excited.
I feel like it's interesting because, I feel like there's a point in your time where you want to do something creative, but then there's going to be a point in time where you want to do kind of many facets of the creative kind of entertainment industry, whether it's on camera, behind the scenes, the photography stuff. Would you say you wanted to do a lot of different things, started as a young age?
Yeah, I actually, it's funny that you say that. From as early on as I can remember, I could not stick to playing one sport. My parents were the worst. I would go play baseball for 2 months and be like, nah, I'm done with this. And then I would go play soccer for like 6 months. I could not hold on to anything. And I think it was more of I just wanted to try everything and see how everything worked, and not so much that I didn't like it. So I think it was more coming from I like to do it all. I like to try it all. And I think that really transferred over when I started acting and getting into photography. I think just wanting to know how everything works and wanting to know about everything really played a big part.
It's funny you mentioned the sports thing, because I remember reading a stat somewhere. It was a high percentage of professional athletes that played more than one sport growing up. It was
I feel like it's crazy. I mean, you hear so many stories about athletes who started on one route, and now I've heard stories of athletes who are in the Olympics who didn't even start their sport until way later on because they were busy trying so many other things. It's cool.
Absolutely. You got to work on season 2 of one of my favorite shows on TV, Swagger. Episodes are kind of dropping weekly now on Apple TV Plus for season 2. The thing that I love about this show is the fact that sometimes it does feel like I'm watching two shows, where in one regard I'm watching a show about sports and basketball, but in the other regard of things, it's not about sports and basketball at all. It's about things way more important. Did it read like that when you signed on to the project?
I think for sure. I watched the first season after I'd found out that I was going to play Brian in the second season, and for me, I think I'm not a big basketball guy. That is just not, I never grew up. That was the one sport I never played, just because, that was the one I wasn't very good at. But when I was reading, my character and reading the script, I could see why the show is so successful and why the cast is so successful, because even if you're not your average sports watcher goer, there's so many different things in the show to relate to and connect to that go beyond just the sport of basketball, which is really, really cool. And I mean, it was such an amazing first massive project to work on.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I found so many different things that I could relate to that went beyond the basketball scene.
It's interesting too, because for a lot of my kind of listeners and viewers, we're a really big fan of the show. So we've interviewed a lot of the cast, and I don't remember a show that Swagger that tackles so many issues in one show. It's crazy to me.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like there's a lot of that in the second season,
yes.
as everyone's getting older, as you get older, the roadblocks you run into and the scenarios you get put into become a little bit more intensified. And so
the stakes are higher.
Yeah, the stakes are way higher. You have school, you have scholarships, you have, so many different things going on. And I remember that's kind of how it was for me when I was getting to my senior year. Is everything just feels so much more intensified, and I think that really plays out in the second season. So I'm excited for everyone to watch it.
100%. One of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about when I got this confirmed, because you were an actor, you're an actor, you also do photography, is a big thing too. I have a lot of friends on sets and everything. They have all the BTS content that they have kind of waiting in a bank, basically, ready 100%. To go once they're allowed to post and everything. I feel because you're a photographer, did everyone kind of message you for all the BTS content? Because I feel your BTS content would be the best.
So it's funny that you say that, because I was kind of, leading up to when the show was coming out, I was kind of going back in my phone, and I was like, why do I have nothing? I was like, this is so unlike me. And, and I kept going back, and I was like, why did I have nothing? And I think for me, it was my first, big like show that I was working on. I think I went into it being like, okay, just focus on the focus on the work, focus on not getting fired, focus on making everybody on set happy. And I think I remember, I think I left all my film cameras at home, and I was just like, I don't want to take a picture. And then like some like AD comes up to me and they're like, yo, like, why did you just take a picture? Like, no photographer.
Like, what if it was the opposite, though? You never know.
I know.
Like, someone comes up to you, hey, man, where's your camera?
90% of me regrets not bringing them. But, it's funny. You have creative ways when you are a creative and a photographer. I actually bought a film, like Polaroid camera that actually lets you take photos from your phone.
Yeah.
Transfer them into make Polaroid. So I took BTS photos that I had on my phone and just turned them into
Are those
Polaroid.
The ones that they're on your Instagram, right?
I sent them to the cast, and they were like,
that's why I'm asking a question, because I'm like, your BTS stuff is
you would never tell. So, there's ways to like sneak around if, you're not on it that week, which I definitely wasn't. But it was cool because I sent them all to the cast and they were like, wait, we do not even remember you taking these Polaroids of us. And so they appreciated it and they loved it.
A lot of people on kind of online and social media think they know kind of everything about being an actor, everything about being a photographer, a lot of opinions out there. I want to focus on the photography stuff. What is a misconception on the top of your head, Oliver, about being a photographer that comes to mind, where people are kind of like, hey, Oliver, it's like this, right? And you're like, actually, it's the opposite of that. It's not like that at all. Is there any misconception about being a photographer?
I think the biggest thing that people like portray or mistake is that they can just you can do it. It might not be the best work, but you can just pick up a camera and the work's going to be amazing. There's so many different factors and different things that you have to learn about. And I mean, I'm all self-taught. So I watched just hours and hours of YouTube videos on how to light, how to load film, what type of film is best for what kind of scenarios. And I think, a lot of people are like, oh, it's a film camera, it makes everything look good. And, I think I used to think like that. And then my first kind of trial and error of when I would shoot friends or when I would shoot fellow actors or people in the industry, I would be like, wait, it's so much more than just the film camera is going to do all the work, or this is going to do all the work. Is there's so many different things. And I think as I've grown with my photography and as I've gotten on bigger sets and worked on bigger projects outside of acting that relate to photography, you just keep picking up on little things that, you wouldn't necessarily think about before. And it's similar how Swagger was when I showed up. I was like, wow, there are so many people on the set. There's so many different things that go into making it look good. So I think that's the best thing is all the small stuff that goes into it for sure.
You sometimes do take a photo on your camera though, out of nowhere, just to take it out and you look at it, you're like, this is a sick photo. And it's like, what
I will say that. And that's sometimes the best photos I get on shoots are ones that I'm wasn't even it wasn't planned, or it wasn't I wasn't I need this for the shot list. It just kind of happened, and it ends up sometimes being some of the people's favorite shots. So
the answer to this question might straight up be no, or I don't really think about this. Does the acting complement the photography and the photography complement the acting in terms of kind of the skill sets?
That's a good question. I think yes and no. I think when it comes to seeing how cameras work, I think for that it's been helpful. I think when we were shooting Swagger and on set, and when I did my first scene, it helped to know that if a camera angle was maybe up a little bit more, I'd know that you'd see a little bit more of this side of my face, or my eye line might be a little bit different. And I think if you don't know that, it's not necessarily a negative. I just think it gives you a leg up because it's one less note the director has to give you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I do find it interesting because at the end of the day, it's all storytelling and creating, if you think about it, right? So that commonality is always going to be there, but I feel like the mindsets are going to be different a little bit. Does it sometimes though feel similar, kind of getting on a set though, whether it's a photography set or an acting set, where you show up, you're getting everything ready? Is the mindset a little different, or is it the same a little bit?
I honestly would say it's pretty much the same. Your trailers, you have your crew, you have your equipment. So it's nice because the acting is a little bit more, when you're on set for that, it's a little bit more intense and high stakes, just because you have to produce and you're the one being hired. And I mean, it is the same for photography, but it's a little bit less high stakes because there's not as many people involved. And, yes, there are big sets that I've worked on for photography, but you get to play around a little bit more. So I think it's a little less high stakes, but the setup and the way I approach it is very similar.
100%. You established in the beginning of this interview, Oliver, that Swagger was like one of your bigger projects, your bigger breaks and everything. Learning experiences on sets from an acting storyteller perspective always interests me, because I feel like no matter whether you've been on a set one time or thousands of time, you're always going to take something away. You're always going to learn something. What were some learning experiences for Oliver Blank from a storytelling acting perspective on Swagger?
Well, it was a really long process. I think I taped, I want to say, for 5 different characters before I ended up doing Brian. So, I knew the project like in and out, back of my hand, just kind of like all the characters that were going to be in the second season. So I think that already gave me a leg up. But I think definitely learning experience wise, I mean, this is all stuff I was doing already, but just, I think what I've learned from coaches, mentors, managers, agents, whatever, is just the 2 biggest rules are like, don't be the person that doesn't know your lines. Nope. And be 15 minutes early everywhere, because you don't want to be the one that they're waiting on, especially when you're not doing when you're not like series regular, when you're not, when you're not like, when you're coming to be a guest on someone's show, it's really important that you show up with like the best manners. And I think I was already going into that with that mindset, but I think everything I learned there just strengthened it. 100%. Just like being a team player for sure. And, I got really lucky with that cast. I mean, Isaiah, Caleel, all those kids, I showed up.
James.
Yeah, like James especially. I mean, I was chatting with him the other day, but like those group of boys, I showed up and it was like they'd never seen me before in my life, and they really just kind of like let me just hang out with them, like vibe with them, and get to like chill with them. And I think you hear so many horror stories of actors who go on sets and the cast is really hard to work with, or the crew might be really hard to work with, and it was like one of the truly like blessed to have like that be one of my first big experiences, just because everyone was so welcoming with open arms. So I couldn't have had it better. Seriously.
That's amazing. And
Matthew was great. He was a great director. He kind of understood like where like everybody like had their strengths and their weaknesses. And, he really like guided everybody through with like no judgment, and was like very patient with everyone. He was great.
And I've heard all that. Like I've heard this from every cast members as well. And it's amazing to kind of universally hear it from everyone, that there's like a consensus that was just amazing. And episodes of season 2 of Swagger are rolling out weekly on Apple TV Plus, so you can check that out. Oliver, this was great chatting with you, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.
Yeah. Your Instagram account, where can people kind of follow to keep up with everything?
As far as that goes, I have some fun projects that I'm working on right now that are in the works. So those will be down the road. But for now, you can keep up with me on Instagram. It's just oliver.blank. And that's kind of like mainly where I hang out. Yeah. That's where I'm at.
Absolutely. Well, this has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous episodes. Until next time, it's Oliver Blank and PD Beats signing off.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.